The morning sun painted the sky with soft shades of orange as Sarah zipped up her backpack and smiled at her 5-year-old son, Ethan. "Are you ready for an adventure?" she asked. Ethan's blue eyes sparkled with excitement. "Yes, Mommy. I want to see deer and birds." Sarah laughed and gently held his small hand. She was a 30-year-old single mother who loved nature. Life had not been easy after losing her husband 3 years earlier, but Ethan had become her greatest reason to smile. It was the first weekend of summer, and Sarah decided to take Ethan on a short hiking trip through Pine Valley National Forest. The trail was known for its beautiful waterfalls, colorful flowers, and peaceful wildlife. "This will be a memory we'll never forget," Sarah said. The forest welcomed them with cool air and the sweet smell of pine trees. Birds sang from high branches while butterflies danced among the wildflowers. Ethan pointed excitedly. "Look, Mommy. A rabbit." A white rabbit jumped across the trail before disappearing into the bushes. Sarah smiled. "Stay close to me, sweetheart." For hours they enjoyed the peaceful walk. They stopped beside a crystal-clear stream to eat sandwiches and fresh fruit. Everything felt perfect. Then the weather suddenly changed. Dark clouds rolled across the sky. A cold wind rushed through the trees. Sarah looked up. "That's strange," she whispered. The weather forecast had promised sunshine all day. Within minutes, thunder echoed across the mountains. Rain began falling harder and harder. "We need to head back," Sarah said quickly. She grabbed Ethan's hand and started following the trail. But heavy rain washed away the footprints. The wooden trail signs became impossible to see through the storm. Branches crashed around them. The wind howled like a wild animal. Sarah checked her phone. No signal. Her heart beat faster. They continued walking, believing they were heading toward the parking area. Instead, they were walking deeper into the forest. An hour later, the rain finally stopped. The silence felt frightening. Sarah looked around. Nothing looked familiar. No trail. No signs. No people. Only endless trees. Ethan looked up nervously. "Mommy, are we lost?" Sarah forced herself to smile. "We'll find our way." But inside, fear had already taken hold. As evening approached, Sarah knew wandering in the dark would only make things worse. "We're staying here tonight." She searched for a safe place away from tall dead trees. Near a giant fallen log, she found a natural shelter formed by thick rocks and tree roots. "It'll protect us from the wind." Using fallen branches, leaves, and moss, Sarah made a soft bed on the ground. It wasn't comfortable, but it was better than sleeping in the open. Ethan wrapped his tiny arms around her. "I'm scared." Sarah kissed his forehead. "So am I." It was the first honest thing she had said all day. As darkness covered the forest, strange sounds surrounded them. Owls called from the trees. Leaves rustled nearby. Something large moved through the bushes. Sarah held Ethan tightly. Every sound felt like danger. Hours passed without sleep. Around midnight, a loud growl echoed through the darkness. Sarah froze. The growl came again. Closer. Very close. She slowly turned her flashlight toward the trees. 2 glowing yellow eyes stared back at her. Her breathing stopped. A large wolf stood only 20 feet away. The animal watched them silently. Sarah knew one sudden movement could trigger an attack. She remembered something she had once read. Never run from a wild predator. She slowly reached for a thick burning branch from the small fire she had managed to start using a lighter from her backpack. Holding the flame high above her head, she shouted with all her strength, "Go away." The wolf stepped back. Sarah grabbed 2 metal cooking cups from her backpack and banged them together loudly. Clang! 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 The sharp noise echoed through the forest. The wolf hesitated, then slowly disappeared into the darkness. Sarah collapsed onto the ground. Her hands shook uncontrollably. She had protected Ethan. For now. Morning arrived with golden sunlight shining through the trees. They had survived their first night. But a far greater challenge awaited them. Food, water, and finding their way home. Sarah checked her backpack. Only 1 bottle of water remained. 2 apples. A small bag of crackers. A flashlight. A lighter. A pocket knife. A thin emergency blanket. That was everything. It has to last, she whispered. After sharing breakfast with Ethan, they continued walking carefully. Sarah marked trees with her pocket knife so they wouldn't walk in circles. Hours later, Ethan became tired. My feet hurt. Sarah lifted him onto her back despite her own exhaustion. She kept walking, step after step. Suddenly Ethan pointed ahead. Water. A narrow stream flowed between the rocks. Sarah smiled for the first time in 2 days. She remembered that drinking untreated stream water could be dangerous. Using a small metal cup, she collected water and boiled it over a tiny fire before allowing Ethan to drink. Tasted wonderful. They refilled every container they had. For the first time, hope returned. That afternoon Sarah discovered wild blackberry bushes. She carefully picked only the berries she recognized as safe. Ethan laughed as purple juice covered his face. These are yummy. Sarah smiled. Seeing him laugh gave her strength. But survival was about more than food. They needed shelter before sunset. This time Sarah built something stronger. She leaned long branches against a fallen tree to create a small roof. She covered it with leaves, moss, and thick fern plants. Inside, the shelter stayed surprisingly warm. Mommy, it's like a little house. It is, Sarah replied. Our jungle house. That night they sat beside a small fire. Ethan rested his head on Sarah's shoulder. When we go home. Sarah listened carefully. Can we come back to the forest? She almost laughed. After everything they had experienced, her brave little boy still saw beauty instead of fear. Maybe someday, she whispered. But next time we'll stay on the trail. Both of them laughed softly. Then, a loud crack echoed somewhere behind the trees. Sarah immediately stood. Another crack. Heavy footsteps. Much heavier than the wolf. Branches snapped one after another. Something enormous was moving toward them. Sarah quickly blew out the fire. The forest became silent again. Only the sound of breathing remained. Her own. And Ethan's. The footsteps stopped. For several terrifying seconds, nothing moved. Then a giant shadow slowly appeared between the trees. It was taller than any animal Sarah had ever seen. Its dark shape stood perfectly still, watching them from the darkness. Sarah held Ethan tightly against her chest and whispered, "No matter what happens, I won't let anything hurt you." The shadow took one slow step forward. Then another. Sarah tightened her grip on the pocket knife, knowing it would do almost nothing against a creature that size. The leaves rustled. A deep growl echoed through the forest. And in that terrifying moment, Sarah realized their fight for survival had only just begun. Sarah tightened her grip on the small pocket knife as the enormous shadow stepped out from behind the trees. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the creature could hear it. Ethan buried his face against her shoulder, trembling. "Mommy, what is it?" Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't. The dark figure slowly moved into the moonlight. Then, she finally saw it. It was not a monster. It was a massive black bear. The bear was easily twice Sarah's size. Its thick black fur glistened under the moonlight, and its powerful nose sniffed the air. It had smelled the food in Sarah's backpack. Sarah remembered something she had learned years ago while reading about wildlife. Never run from a bear. Running could trigger its instinct to chase. She slowly stood up, placing Ethan behind her. "Stay very quiet," she whispered. The bear took another slow step toward them. Sarah picked up a burning branch from the dying campfire and held it high. Then she raised both arms to make herself appear larger. "Go away!" she shouted with all the strength she had. The bear stopped. It looked at the fire. It sniffed the smoke. For a few terrifying seconds, nothing happened. Then the giant animal let out a deep grunt, turned around, and slowly disappeared into the darkness. Sarah's legs gave way beneath her. She fell to her knees. Tears filled her eyes. They were alive. Again. That night neither of them slept. Every crack of a branch made Sarah sit upright. Every whisper of the wind sounded like another predator waiting in the darkness. At sunrise, Ethan smiled weakly. "Did we win, Mommy?" Sarah hugged him tightly. "We survived." "And sometimes," she whispered, "surviving is the greatest victory." The next morning they continued walking. Sarah marked trees with her pocket knife so they would not travel in circles. Hours passed. The forest became thicker. Sunlight barely reached the ground. Huge vines hung from ancient trees. Colorful birds flew overhead. Everything looked beautiful. But beauty could also hide danger. Ethan suddenly stopped walking. "Mommy, what is it?" He pointed at the ground. A long green snake slowly slithered across the path only a few feet away. Sarah instantly pulled Ethan backward. The snake lifted its head for a moment before quietly disappearing beneath the leaves. Sarah waited several minutes before moving again. "Always watch where you step," she told Ethan. "The forest gives life, but it can also take it away." Ethan nodded seriously. He understood now that this was no ordinary adventure. By afternoon, the hot sun made them exhausted. Their water bottles were nearly empty. Sarah listened carefully. Then she heard it. The gentle sound of flowing water. She followed the sound until they reached a beautiful stream flowing over smooth rocks. This time Sarah knew exactly what to do. She collected water in her metal cup. She built a small fire using dry bark, sticks, and the lighter she still carried. Soon the water began to boil. Steam rose into the air. Ethan smiled. "You always know what to do." Sarah looked into the boiling water. "No," she replied softly. "I'm learning. Because I have to." Later they found wild blackberry bushes. Sarah carefully checked every berry before picking it. Nearby she discovered walnut trees. Breaking the shells with stones, she shared the fresh nuts with Ethan. It wasn't much. But together with berries, it was enough to keep going. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered once again. Thunder echoed across the mountains. Sarah looked at the sky. "We need shelter now." They searched quickly. Finally Sarah found the roots of a giant fallen tree. Using long branches, large leaves, and vines, she built a stronger shelter than before. She spread the emergency blanket over the roof to help keep the rain out. Just as they climbed inside, the storm began. Rain crashed through the forest like a waterfall. Powerful winds bent the trees. Lightning lit the sky. The shelter shook violently. Ethan clung tightly to Sarah. "I'm scared." "I know." She wrapped him inside the emergency blanket. "You are safe with me." For hours the storm raged. Water flooded the forest floor. Several trees crashed nearby with terrifying force. Yet somehow, their little shelter survived. Morning revealed a completely different forest. Broken branches covered the ground. Small streams had become rushing rivers. The trail they had been following was completely gone. Everything looked unfamiliar. Sarah realized something terrifying. If rescue teams are looking for us, they'll never know where we are. Still, giving up was not an option. They kept walking. Near noon Ethan suddenly stumbled. Sarah caught him before he fell. His face looked pale. His forehead felt hot. He had a fever. Fear gripped Sarah harder than ever before. Wild animals no longer frightened her as much as this. She sat beside him under a large tree. "I'm tired," Ethan whispered. Sarah gently wiped his forehead with cool water. "You can rest. But don't go to sleep for too long." She stayed beside him for hours telling stories about home. She spoke about pancakes on Sunday mornings, about Ethan's favorite toy truck, about bedtime stories, about the little garden behind their house. She wanted him to remember that another life still existed beyond this endless forest. Slowly, his fever began to fall. By evening he smiled again. "I feel better." Sarah closed her eyes in relief. Felt like receiving a miracle. The following day brought new hope. High above the trees, Sarah heard a distant sound. She looked up. A helicopter. "Ethan!" She jumped to her feet. "They're searching for us." She waved her bright emergency blanket through the trees. She shouted until her throat hurt. "Help! We're here." The helicopter circled once. Sarah's heart raced with hope. It seemed to move toward them. Then, without warning, it turned away. The sound slowly faded into the distance. Silence returned. Sarah stood frozen. They had been so close. Tears rolled down her face. Ethan gently held her hand. "It's okay, Mommy. They'll come back." His tiny voice carried more hope than she could find within herself. She hugged him tightly. I promise. I will never stop trying. As night fell again, Sarah built another fire. She stared into the flames. Then she noticed something strange. Far away, between the trees, a small orange light flickered. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't fireflies. It looked exactly like a campfire. Someone else was in the forest. Or something was. Sarah's exhausted eyes remained fixed on the mysterious light as it flickered in the darkness. Was it a rescue team? Another lost traveler? Or someone she should fear? She held Ethan close. Tomorrow they would find out. And neither of them could imagine how much their lives were about to change.